Let's look at the 4 teams who left the World Cup kind of before it started. Certainly if you listen to some of the commentators who accidentally said the quiet bit out loud when they said that the Australia-South Africa game was the first game of the tournament.
This is the last knock. My dad refuses to tell me what this means.
But I really want to start with a quick note just on PNG and the Dutch. Because right now I think a lot of people have been watching this tournament and maybe don't follow a lot of these teams will be thinking, well, these are just not very good cricket teams. It's important to note that in the qualifying tournament, which is one of the most brutal tournaments that anyone has to go through in world cricket, over 8 games, these were the 2 best teams. PNG made the final and they were beaten by the Netherlands. Now that was 2 years ago and a lot has changed since then. Like, I know this COVID thing happened and PNG hasn't played much and all sorts of things have happened within cricket. But it means that even if you thought, oh, these guys don't look anywhere near some of the other teams, they were at one stage actually better than teams like Scotland and Oman and Namibia. But they're also the 2 teams that didn't win a single game. So let's start with one of them, the Netherlands. It's easy for me to go into great depth when looking at T20 games and, even 3 T20 games. Truth is, with the Netherlands, I'm not sure there's that much to look at here. They lost 4 wickets in 4 balls, which cost them a game. And, they weren't blown away in those 4 wickets. They just lost them. These things sometimes happen. And by the time they got to Sri Lanka, it was already over. I mean, if you watch that game, just watching Peter Salar's face as he walked off the field was, a good example of a captain just going, this is not our time. So if you take the shit happens approach to the island game and the fact that the Sri Lanka one already didn't matter, although the way they played spin in that game might have said that they might have struggled anyway, it means you don't have much left to look at for their tournament. But the Namibia game does really stick out. O'Dowd made runs for them twice in this tournament, but both times it was quite slow, which meant that they never really got going even when they were scoring. He's really going to have to look into developing some boundary options to just up his scoring rate a little bit. But it is unfair to pick on him as he actually made runs for a team of which almost no one else made any runs. And if you look at the Namibia game, they made 164. Realistically, with their bowling attack, they're probably a team that's looking to score between 140 and 170 more often than not, and then back their bowlers. So that 164 against Namibia should have been enough with their bowling attack. And they took 3 early wickets as Namibia fell behind the rate. But then Erasmus and Wisa really just took the game away from them, and I think that's the one that's really going to sting far more than Campher's 4 wickets or the collapse against Sri Lanka. And it meant that the last game didn't really mean anything other than the fact that it was also Ryan Tenduskarta's last game for the Netherlands and probably professionally. And it is worth mentioning Tenduskarta because I think when they lost 4 wickets in 4 balls, everyone's like, the Dutch lost 4 wickets in 4 balls. But look at the batters in that particular lineup. Look at the batters who failed even against Sri Lanka. This is not an ordinary batting lineup. This is by far and away the best batting lineup that the Dutch have ever managed to put together. Only probably Tom Cooper is missing from this team. The ability to have Ryan Tenduskarta, Roelof van der Merwe and Colin Ackerman all in one lineup means that you should be guaranteed some scores. Which is why it just felt so much more frustrating that they really only made a single score in this tournament. But if it's close to the best batting lineup they've ever had, well, it might also be one of the oldest. Stefan Myburgh is 37, Roelof van der Merwe is about to turn 37, and Tenduskarta was 41. When it comes to the bowling, there does seem to be a lot of younger talent coming through there. With the batting, it's not as evident. It's going to be near on impossible for them to find another player of Tenduskarta's quality. If Roelof leaves, his all-round skill and his quality, again, won't be that easy to find. And Myburgh has been playing, top-level cricket for the Dutch for a very long time. That experience, again, can't easily be replaced. At their ages, all 3 of them might be gone before the next tournament. With the ages of Roelof and Myburgh, chances are at least one of them will be gone before the next tournament. Maybe both? That's not ideal for Dutch cricket. I think if you're a Dutch fan, you'll be very frustrated with how they've played here. But even if you say, wow, this is a write-off and just one of those things and 3 bad matches and all that, which is all fair, do we really think the Dutch is going to be a much better team the next time a World T20 comes around? And I think that's what would frustrate me more if I was a Dutch fan right at the moment. As good as their bowling is, I'm not sure if we could see their team getting that much better. PNG had an absolute shocker, which for those of us who'd been paying attention with how much cricket that they played between the qualifiers and now was thinking that this was a possibility. They just didn't play enough cricket coming into this tournament. And I suppose there's also a question of just how good this team actually is as well. Are they a team worthy of being in the World Cup, or were they a team that just caught absolute fire at the right time during the qualifying event? Right now, it obviously looks like the latter because they went 0-3, but there's still clearly plenty of talent in this team. So I'm finding it hard to rate them too poorly based on these particular games just because of how good they were back in the qualifiers. But maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle between how well they played in the qualifiers and how poor they were in this. If you just looked at these 3 games alone, I think you'd say that their batting lacks a certain level of talent, and their bowling is very varied, but maybe not quite of the level that you want it to be. I mean, in truth, I don't think their batting was particularly amazing even in the qualifying events either. Their skill in the qualifiers really wasn't their batting either. They do lack batters who can consistently make runs at a decent strike rate. But the way they've made up for this in general is because they've got a couple of top order batters who can bowl a bit, which means that they can have a very, very long batting order. And that also helps their bowling because it gives them incredible versatility for matchups or tactics. But in this tournament, Amini and Vala, the two top order all-rounders, just did not perform very well with the ball. Amini just couldn't land it. I don't think I've ever seen him just have so much trouble landing the ball where he wanted to. And Team Cena realized the ball wasn't coming out of his hand perfectly and they went at him. Vala just looked really easy to score off, which again has not been something that's been known for him. At certain stages, he looked more like a part-timer than a frontline bowler, and that hasn't been the case for PNG. But in truth, most of their bowlers struggled, and that was the really disappointing thing for them. Outside of Kabua Maria's left-arm seam, and I thought he bowled some really good spells at time, and maybe Porkana for the couple of overs that he was allowed to bowl, I thought the rest of their bowlers just didn't look that good, and this is a bowling team. But their batting is a far bigger concern for me. They just can't find regular run scorers. In the 8 qualifying games, they didn't have a single batter make over 200 runs. And so no one scored a lot of runs, but the other problem was that most of the players also had a strike rate of under 120. With great bowling performances around them, that didn't matter too much. But that's just not going to be something that's always going to happen. There are still some great signs here. I thought their fielding completely held up. I thought Kipling Dariga batted really well, and his wicket keeping is obviously sensational. And you would assume that with their bowling talent, there will be times when they bowl better. But until they make runs consistently, I can't see how they'll be a consistent World Cup team. They might have times where they do really well, but they're going to have other times where they don't. 2019, they were doing really well with the ball, and 2021, they were not. But congrats to PNG, because they did win Best Hat Award, which is something I just made up. Oman had a chance going into the final game of getting into the second round. They blew that game, and they also blew their game before that. They ended up with a 1-2 record, and they really had a good chance of going 2-1 in this tournament. I think they looked a lot better than a 1-2 team. Maybe some of this was because they were at home, but I think they looked a lot better than a team who ended up with a 1-2 record. But that might be slightly overrating them. Their batting is essentially Jatinder Singh, who is everything to them, as he was also in the qualifiers, as he is almost every time he bats for Oman. They really clang a batting lineup around one guy. Akib Ilyas can certainly make runs, but they're going to be slow. They chased a very small total against PNG, but did very well because Jatinder made the majority of their runs. Against Bangladesh, they were doing quite well. And if they weren't going to get an upset, they were at least looking like they were going to get close until Jatinder went out, and then they pretty much had nothing left to chase with. And when Jatinder failed in the game against Scotland, they just didn't have anyone who could put any pressure back on Scotland. And so they ended up with a very modest total. But outside of Jatinder, the reason that they looked so good was just their bowling. Unlike PNG, Oman's bowling completely held up in this World Cup. Googlies, quarter seamer, Karen, Dukes, back of the hand, red, leg cutters, Tisra, pink, knuckle, white, slider, seed, heavy, bounces, cherry, length, pill, off cutters, old, crimson traveller, kookaburra, hard, outswing, second new, off spin, arm, SG, split finger, shiny, leg spin, soft, new, Yorkers, flippers, wrong-uns, long hops, reverse swing, half volley, and third new. These are just some of the names we use for balls in cricket. Well, Manscaped wants you to be as proud of your balls as you are of the ones delivered by your favourite cricketer. Manscaped just launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer, 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Insert the code REDINKA at manscaped.com. I've actually used this, not just something that I'm hawking for fun, and I got to admit, I thought it was a bit silly, and then I went down there, and it was exceptional. I honestly feel I could bowl outswing with one nut and inswing with the other. So get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code REDINKA at manscaped.com. Manscaped, for the man who cares about his balls as much as the ones out in the middle. Bilal Khan just looks like a franchise player already. He just continues to take wickets. He's bouncy and wild, and the ball moves around a little bit. There's just a lot to like about his bowling. He was incredible during the qualifiers, but I thought he was just as good in the few games that he bowled here. He takes wickets and he doesn't get hit. That's pretty good. Zisan Maksud took 3 wickets against PNG in and over, 4 wickets in total. But I still thought there was enough good signs there of him being a very clever bowler. Not a particularly high skill bowler. He seemed to have the ability to think through situations, and he certainly didn't get hit much in this tournament. But they had a lot of bowlers with very low econs in this tournament. No one really got hit that much. Scotland really crawled to their total, which isn't necessarily the way that Scotland played cricket. Bangladesh didn't get away from them at all. And when it looked like PNG was going to put on a big total, that's when they had the massive collapse. Perhaps only Mohammad Nadeem, the knuckleball bowler who bowls in the middle, looked a little bit out of his depth at times, but all of their other seamers I thought did really well. And I would have liked to see more of the leg spinner Kawa Ali, who bowled well in the qualifiers but was kind of hidden away at times in this tournament. But the team they were in the qualifiers is still the team they are now, and as you've seen with the Dutch and the PNG, that's not quite the case. So I think there's a lot of positives here, even if they only ended up winning one game. Honestly, if they could just find one other quality batter around Jatinder Singh, I think they've got a really good side here. Of course, just finding one is hard enough. PNG would absolutely love to have one Jatinder Singh. Oman would absolutely love to have 2. This is a kick in the teeth and I suppose in the arse for Ireland. They're a test playing nation and they'll be rightfully gutted that they haven't gone through to the Super 12s or round of 12 or second round. I don't know, whatever it's been called. Their only win was against the Netherlands, which involved those 4 wickets in 4 balls and also doesn't look like a particularly good win now looking back on it. I think if you're relying on a guy who'd never taken 30 professional wickets to take 4 wickets in 4 balls to win you a game, it says that maybe the rest of your team is not set up perfectly. Andy Balbirnie has been a magnificent cricketer for quite a while now, but he had an absolute shocker this tournament. It could just be that the pitches didn't suit him. It could just be that teams bowled well against him or he was slightly out of form, but he just couldn't score quickly at all. I mean, it's only 3 games. It's not the end of the world. But the problem is, for this Irish team right at the moment, I think so much of their success comes from either Sterling, Balbirnie, Adair or Little, that they need those 4 guys to be firing. The other 3 were, and Balbirnie wasn't, and that might be the difference between them going into the second round and not. Especially looking at Balbirnie's innings against Namibia. And it was Sterling that really gave them a chance of winning that particular game. And all tournament long, Little and Adair completely held up until Adair got injured. And again, if Adair doesn't get injured against Namibia, there's still a chance that Ireland would have gone through to the next level. They were 1-1 going into that 3rd game against Namibia though. They really would have backed themselves to have won that. And after Sterling went out, they just all batted poorly. I singled out Balbirnie before because I think he's the best player, but realistically, all the way through the order, they just didn't get it done. But they also had a chance against Sri Lanka. I mean, they had them 8 for 3, and then Hasaranga disemboweled them with the bat, and then with the ball, he displayed those bowels and other intestines in a jar. I think the thing that concerned me at times with the way they batted was they never seemed to really be on top of the pace bowling on these pitches, but also they clearly struggled with the spin. It's not a great combination, is it? I mean, the Irish golden generation is obviously well and truly gone by this point. You could make that call maybe in 2016 or 2017 and then again in 2019. But now those players are gone. Kevin O'Brien is sort of the last man standing from that. And there is some really good talent coming through the team. You know, the 4 players I mentioned before are not particularly old, although Sterling and Balbirnie are a little bit older. But you've got Harry Tector and Curtis Camphor and Gareth Delaney all coming through. But what they don't look like, and I'm even including when they played against South Africa recently, is a sort of full 11. All the way through. There are a couple of really good players who are obviously incredible talents and a few other players who are just probably not quite up to international cricket. And having said all that, if you're an Irish fan and you go, well, wait a minute, if we'd had a little bit of luck against Namibia, if the bowled or the LBW had gone their way, and you might be thinking as an Irish fan, well, if we had a little bit of luck here with the bowled or the LBW, we'd still be going through the next level. And the thing is, that's right. I mean, that's probably because of the core players are so talented. But there is another way of looking at this. If you look at all the teams in that first round, is Ireland in the best 5 T20 teams in that group? I'm not sure they are.